Welcome to Commander Central, episode 84. Today we're going to take a long, hard look at the size of your pod and how that changes just how satisfying your game is. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
How are you gentlemen doing tonight?
We're unburied from the 2 feet of snow we've gotten in the last
That's
week.
not an exaggeration. We've had 2 feet of snow in the last 8 days or so.
I don't know, the snowbanks next to Max's house and my house are taller than we are, and I'm almost 6 foot.
I can't see over the snowbanks either.
Yeah, you're like
insane.
6'3" or 6'4" or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. So I have
Max
survived
is 5
that.
foot nothing, so
Yeah,
of
right,
course he can't see anything.
Whatever. I get my jetpack on and
Well, I just keep doing that like it's middle of February. We're not that far from spring.
I did see something amusing on Facebook, though, today. How to keep track of your small friends in the snow. And it's a little like belt thing that you put on with a flag that sticks way up in the air.
That's not a bad idea. I have to remember that if we take Max out anywhere in public, we have to tie a little, like a balloon to his belt or something in case we lose him.
I just want the cool monkey backpack with the leash, to be quite honest.
So I think the biggest thing that irritated me about this snowfall that we got, aside from my parking ticket and spending 2.5 hours unburying my car from the plow, was walking my son to school after school finally resumed.
After 2 weeks, essentially.
Right, yeah.
And like the guys who do my driveway do like half of our block of the sidewalk.
Okay.
Then we had to walk through knee-deep snow all the way to school for 3.5 blocks. I'm like, oh, this sucks so bad. So then on the way home, we just walked through the road.
Yeah,
I was
right,
like,
yeah.
nope, enough of this.
Well, there was some lady out walking her dog in the street because sidewalks weren't plowed, and this was on whatever day it was. But she had snowshoes on. She had went and found snowshoes somewhere and was wearing snowshoes to walk her dog.
That's called being prepared.
That's Wisconsin right there for you.
The poor dog, though, if you walked in, anything would sink and she'd just stay on
Right.
top.
She's on top of the poor dog trying to fight through the street.
See the snow ruffle because it's digging a tunnel.
That's how it looked like with my dog when Cindy took him out. And then she was cleaning off the cars and all that. My dog just like jumps off the side of the porch and poof,
It's
just
gone.
disappeared.
Yeah. Well, because of this awful snowstorm we've had twice in a row, we didn't get to play Magic again. This is the first time I've missed 2 consecutive EDH nights in 5 years, if not more, maybe.
Same here.
First one is your guys' fault because I was there on a Tuesday.
You fought through it.
There was like, I think there was 8 of us there, 8 or 10 of us there.
This week the shop was just closed.
No,
We're like, nope.
The owner was just like, no, I'm just going to close. I'm like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. And we don't have to spend 2 hours outside helping people
Push
unbury
people out
their
of the parking lot,
cars.
yeah. Well, I wound up going and playing a few games on Friday night. So I want to mention this anecdote because it probably applies to literally every person who plays Commander. We had a new player who, she knew how to play Magic. You know, she had played in high school, but she played 60-card Magic, and it was 5, 8 years ago, whatever it was. So she knew the basics, tap a land, attack with a creature, all that kind of stuff.
Damage on the stack, mana burn.
Right.
Legend rule.
Right. We didn't even get to that point. So she asked, you know, she wanted to borrow a deck, and I'm like trying to think what my easiest deck would be. I'm like, oh, well, it's probably my Recce deck. It's monocolored, easy mana base. You're just playing dudes and swinging. Well,
No.
you're both shaking your head, and that's the correct response because it was not. Although, here's the thing. I don't think any other deck would have been easier. I just think EDH is an insanely complicated game.
I think your easiest deck to play probably is Sigarda. Because
Yeah,
all you're
maybe
doing is
throw
just
enchantments
It's
on.
super
and that's it.
linear.
jam enchantments into it. It has nothing really like response-wise or mass removal-wise or like hard decisions. It's just,
Sure.
okay, who do I kill first is pretty much what your decision is.
But it's even the little things that kind of we take for granted. Like at one point she had a Nykthos out, and she goes to tap Nykthos to cast a creature. I'm like, well, why don't you play your creature using other lands first, and you'll have more devotion for your Nykthos, so you can get more mana. We just take that for granted. Like as a new player, that's a foreign concept. And then she has Guruk Wildspeaker out to untap 2 lands, and she goes to untap 2 lands. I'm like, well, untap your Nykthos with that, and then play some more stuff, and then use that, like things like that we just automatically go do. That's a new player never ever would even think of those kind of things. So that kind of stuff really kind of surprised me about how complicated that got. And then at one point she's looking at her cards, and I was kind of helping her play, and she had a this Kamal Strategic Vow in hand. I'm like, okay, well, you already want to cast that because
Game over.
Because there was a mana doubler out, and I'm like, well, what you're gonna do is cast that for 22, and then her eyes just glazed over at that point because I'm like, well, you're gonna put all these lands in play, which then you can reuse to cast a bunch more. Like, Alchemist Archive came down. I'm like, okay, so now every creature you play, you draw 2, and now you're gonna draw 6 off that Harmonize. And she's like, I don't know what's happening. And And everybody at the table's like, well, we're pretty sure you're about to win.
Yep.
But she wasn't quite there yet because we hadn't hit the haste enabler. But she had because after doing all of that, then like Selvala comes down with Lightning Greaves. I'm like, okay, so now you can tap Selvala for the size of your Multani for another, 18 mana and do it all again. Things got really, really complicated. But then I just was thinking about it. I'm like, that happens in every deck at some point for the most part. You're just going to get weird board states. Maybe not quite like that, but Commander is just not very friendly for a new player at all.
Wait, I've noticed that with a few different cards like Primal Surge.
Right,
type of deal. You jam so much stuff in, but then each thing has an ability and
all those triggers
that stuff.
are you bet. So anyway,
they're all green cards.
Right.
Your easiest deck is not that easy of a deck when you're handing it to a new player.
And you took Lapras apart. You could have just kept that. And
I could have, I guess.
That's your new player
You're just
deck.
casting big red dragons, I guess.
I think Edric would be pretty easy though too.
Yeah.
Probably,
pretty straightforward.
and it would be fair in a new player's hand because they wouldn't know how to do abusive stuff with it. So that's a good point.
They cast Triumph of the Hordes with one creature out, and you're like, oh, wait.
No, don't do that. But she had fun, and she's going to come back and play again. So I guess I didn't entirely scare her away or scar her with the Reki deck, so that's good.
Well, there we go.
If you want to tell us about how you have the perfect easy deck for a new player to play, how would you find us to let us know?
I think that's a trap question. I don't think there's a perfect easy deck. But you can find us to say whatever you need to say. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. Facebook search us CMDR Central. YouTube search us CMDR Central. Find us online at cmdrcentral.com. And you can find us on the wonderful iTunes
And we would
by
appreciate-
searching CMDR Central.
Yes, indeed. And we'd appreciate the 5-star rating if you can do that on iTunes, or thumbs up on YouTube and a subscribe. That helps us out a
I
lot.
still want to see a 5-star rating and a thumbs down. I wish they'd give both options.
Oh, Lord.
Because somebody certainly would. I wanted to ask you guys this question here before we get any further. We haven't done any games to see anything, but have you guys seen any cards from Ravnica and Allegiance in play so far? Even in Standard, because Chris plays some Standard, that you've been impressed with at this point?
Wilderness Reclamation. That
Whichever.
is the card.
Yeah.
I actually saw that in Modern this weekend too.
So
yeah.
is that the problem with Nexus, or is
Nexus
Is
is
it
now
Nexus?
banned on Arena.
I saw that.
In
That was
best
just
of one.
today. Best of one.
I think Wilderness Reclamation is the problem, not Nexus of Fate. But
Well, you
It
could
doesn't matter.
You could do the stupid things with Nexus of Fate before.
this just
Just
makes it
way
way
easier.
easier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just made it faster, pretty much,
Right.
is what it was.
And when you have multiples of them in Standard and you're doing Nexus of Fate stuff, it just is abusive.
I'm really curious about Wilderness Rec in EDH, because you do have Seaborn Muse, but Seaborn Muse is way easier to remove than Wilderness Rec.
Seedboard Muse is also better because it untaps
Everything.
Everything,
unstep.
not just your own.
Isn't it every
Yeah, and every
too?
unstep.
And Wilderness Reclamation's only your unstep, and it's only lands, so
Right.
But it's much more likely to sit there untouched too.
a blue-green deck's, a Simic deck's going to abuse it really bad.
Right, yeah.
Let's just drop a fatty, and then let's untap for my draw magic or my counter magic.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're playing counter spells in a blue-green deck or something, it's perfect.
I mean, it's just redundancy with Seedborn Muse in
Right,
EDH.
yeah,
Why not
that's
run
true.
both?
I've seen a lot of Spectacle, the ability, and that seems really good. I'm not sure how well it's going to be in Commander due to the 100-card decks, but
It's easier to get damage through, though.
it is.
The one spectacle I've seen so far is Light Up the Stage, which is the draw
Yep.
too. And I've seen it cast. I cast it once, and I saw someone else cast it, and it feels to me like, was it 2 years ago when we got Chart a Course? I was super hyped on Chart a Course in blue, and then last year when we got Notion Rain, I liked Notion Rain a lot in Dimir.
Garbage card.
It's all trash. Light Up the Stage has felt like the best draw spell I've seen in red in a long, like as a spell. There's things like Outpost Siege and Experimental Frenzy stuff that are great, but like as just like a small one-off, like the Night's Whisper you get in black or what have you, man, it really feels good in red, because both times I've seen it cast, it was land and a spell they wanted to use right away.
Yep. I definitely say I would put it as second best draw spell in red.
Behind looting?
But, well, I was going to say behind Wheel of Fortune.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But Wheel of Fortune helps your opponent, so if you're going that route, you don't want to help people.
And it's $100.
Yeah.
Whereas Light Up the Stage is, 50 cents right now.
Now, Electro Dominance. I saw that played in Modern on Monday this week.
How did that work?
It was gross.
What did they cast with it?
So let's just say, okay, turn 1, I cycle this dude who's like a 5/5 draw card. Turn 2, I cycle 2 dudes who are like a 5/5 and a 6/4, draw 2 cards. Turn 3, I cast Electro Dominance for 2 mana, 0. Oh, now I cast Living End or whatever it is and reanimate all these guys. I'm like, oh, this is gross.
Nice. Yeah. With cycling too. That's clever.
Yep.
I like that. Interesting.
Yikes! That's gross, but
I've seen
fun.
I've seen it in EDH twice, and it was fine, but it didn't like jump out at me the way Light at the Stage did.
I think it's a good way to cheat cards that have alternate costs like
Yes,
that.
yeah.
That would be the
Particularly
biggest way to do
in
it.
Modern, where you're dealing with things like Living End, I guess, is the one that's got suspend.
Also, was it Ancestral Vision?
Oh yeah,
That's the one. Yep,
Yeah.
where you can draw 3 cards or whatever.
Sure. Smothering Tithe, I've seen come out twice as well, and neither time did anything gross happen. Like it wasn't like anyone wheeled or anything, but it was just like fantastic value.
I think I have another one if you need it.
Oh, I thought we were doing like the ET phone home thing right
Because
here.
I won that standard tournament,
The
got a
Sistine
box.
Chapel, your fingers are meeting in the middle.
And I was going to trade that box in for store credit, but I actually ended up cracking it because people were looking for cards, which I didn't pull any of the cards they were looking for.
Of course not.
So I'm pretty sure I have one in my rare box.
Okay, cool. That'd be great.
Well, even seeing it in the twice I saw it, and it wasn't even like abused. The person was just making their mana, and they weren't casting wheels or anything. It was still really, really good.
Was it?
So if someone is in a Boros deck where you're playing Reforge of Soul or Wheel of Fortune or whatever, it's going to be that much better. So that card has lived up to the hype, I think, as well.
Yeah, I don't think anyone had doubts about that card, and if you did, well, we're going to prove you wrong.
The one Ryan and Brando at CCO did not like it.
Well, they're in Canada. That doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, I think Canadian, you only have to pay 1. I think on the token,
and you
because
get half a treasure.
and you get half a treasure because of the exchange rate. So that might explain that. So that kind of makes sense if you take that into consideration. All right. If you want to pick up your own copy of Smothering Tithe, Max, where would you do that?
Flipsidegaming.com and use promo code CMDR in all caps, and you'll get 10% off all orders $10 or more.
Absolutely.
I really wish they had foils.
I know.
Yeah, I
looked the other day for some
supposedly
certain-
do, but they're
Yeah, I was
They
looking
probably
for
keep them
certain
in
cards
house
the other
and
day.
sell them
And
in their brick and mortar stores. But we'll be doing something with them for War of the Spark though. So
nice.
look forward to that
Ravnica
later.
Infinity War.
Yes.
basically yes, right. What did I see today? Josh Gad, who does the voice of Olaf in Frozen movies, just wrote on Twitter that he has all the secrets from Frozen 2 and has to now like keep them mum for the next.
Well, the trailer dropped yesterday.
Yeah, and then Mark Ruffalo's response is, "Does everyone die? DM me," because he gave away all the Avengers stuff last time. Accidentally spoiled it all.
Him and Tom Holland. Those are the two people you don't tell anyone.
Well, and then
anything to.
like 2 weeks ago, somebody made a post about how they saw the spoiled footage from Spider-Man: Homecoming. Or not Homecoming, Far From Home, because Tom Holland accidentally leaked it off his phone. And their follow-up response was from Tom Holland saying, "I had to stop and think about that. Did I really do that?" So I respect those two guys owning the fact that they can't keep secrets.
Well, that's fine. I think in that kind of like industry, I think that's fine because people are still gonna go, no matter what.
Not like we weren't going to go see Affinity War,
Yeah.
just knowing everyone dies.
But no, like in the Magic industry, if you leak stuff like that,
That's a whole different deal.
because it puts people farther ahead in the game
Right,
for
yeah.
when it actually gets released and stuff like that.
We also have a new Patreon supporter this week, Max.
We do. We want to say thank you to Tim Rack for supporting us. Of course, head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central. Check out our reward tiers. And if you want to support us, we would greatly appreciate it.
And I think we are over 100 Patreon supporters now, correct?
We did. We crossed the 100 mark last week.
What does that mean?
Well, that means if we still have that number by, let's say, March 2nd,
Okay.
we'll do the drawing for the 2 from the vaults and give those away to 2 lucky patron supporters.
So if you are a Patreon supporter, by March 2nd, you'll be entered in a drawing to win From the Vault Angels and a From the Vault Transform. Is that right?
That is correct.
Oh, I've got a great memory. Like a steel trap. So 2 different Patreon supporters will be thrown in a drawing to win one of those 2 FTVs.
They're also getting the inch of dust that's on my transform.
Yes,
That's
as a thrown-in bonus.
Nice.
The dust has been collecting on Chris's transform as it sat in his shelf.
Otherwise, for Twitter, we have some other contests going on.
That's right, we do.
So our normal monthly Patreon contest this month is going to be 3 packs of Ultimate Masters going out to 1 lucky supporter. And then for Twitter, we're giving away that foil peel altar of Sunforger done by Rafael Garcia.
Thank you very much, Raphael, for that altar. Chris has got one in a deck, and we're giving this one away. Looks really sharp. And we've got a lot of people on Twitter have commented on it as well. And if you want to reach out to Raphael, is his Twitter handle in the...
It's in the tweet every week, yep.
And he will do custom work, so if you want to get a hold of him, he will do that.
He's doing a few for me as we speak.
Excellent. Let's talk about the size of your pod, Max. And Chris, I'm not going to leave you out, Chris. We can discuss that as well.
Oh, I like the strawberry ones.
That's your favorite Tide Pod?
I like the original, the blue-green flavor.
That's one of those things I never thought about until all the Tide Pod jokes. I'm like, they kind of do delicious. They kind of do look delicious if you think about it.
The big thing I don't understand with that is these kids must not have grown up how we did. I'm sure you guys grew up the same way.
Get your mouth washed out with soap.
Yeah. My mom went from the bar soap, which is disgusting, into Dawn dish soap. And then you're like...
Which is way worse because it coats your entire mouth no matter how much you swish it out.
You learned very early not to swear
not to
when
eat
mom
soap,
was around.
right. So we're going to discuss how the size of the pod you play in affects the game you play and what you do in that game. And I think there's three kind of main pod sizes that are an issue here. 3-player, 4-player, which is kind of the standard, and then 5+, because at that point, between 5, 6, it's all just a chaotic mess. And I don't think a lot changes from 5 to 6 for the most part. So we're just going to focus on those three. That's usually what you see, too. You see some variation of that. At least at our shop, if we've got 6 players, we just do 2 3s. So do you guys have a preference? Obviously, I would assume you both would rather play 4-man pods if the choice was there. Chris wouldn't.
I like the big pods.
You like the 5-player plus?
For the simple fact, and this is not a stab at anybody, don't take it that way, but 90% of people I play with don't pay attention to the game.
Okay.
And the bigger the group in the pod,
The less they pay attention?
the less they pay attention.
So that's to your advantage is what you're
Yes.
saying. Okay. How about you, Max?
I prefer probably the 4-player pods.
So if you had to choose between 5 or 3, which way do you go?
I agree with Chris that the big games, kind of you can lean into the advantage of the politics because nobody's paying attention, but they also take forever.
They can, absolutely.
So I think just due to the time constraint, I would lean more to the 3-player pod over the 5-player pod.
I mean, 3-player games almost never last more than an hour. Like, they wrap up relatively quickly, usually. I mean, I'm sure I've had
Hopefully.
long ones, but usually they go pretty fast. Given a choice, I would choose 3 over 5, but I think 4 is my preferred number. I kind of make my decks with 4 in mind for the most part. There's not a lot of things I would do different if I was always playing in a 3-man pod, but there are differences. So let's talk about a few of those. What's the first thing you guys think of when you think of the difference between 3 and 5? Chris, you said paying attention. Is that the first thing that occurs to you?
Yeah, the very first thing.
People in a 5-player pod just aren't paying attention.
And I don't know if it's really that they're not paying attention per se, or if it's just hard to see.
That's a huge part of it.
Yep, the more people that you get in a pod, especially how we play on long rectangular tables.
Yep.
So you can't really see person 5 down the table when you're sitting up at the number 1 spot.
There's no good configuration on a rectangular table. If you're playing a 4-player pod, you're playing basically across from each other and next to somebody. That's never a problem. But when you put that person at the end of the table, they can't. You can't see what they're doing if you're one of the people on the opposite end, one of those 2 people, basically.
Yep.
And if you do a 3 and 2, 3 people on one end, you still kind of get that, or the people on the wings can't really see what's going on. And the turns take so long sometimes, or it takes so long to get around the board, you really get distracted too. And a lot of times you're like, what did that person do way down there? I was thinking the table in that original Michael Keaton Batman movie. It's not quite like that, but it feels like that sometimes. I have no idea what's happening down there. How about you, Max? What's the first thing you think of when you think about the differeces in those pods?
I go right to what deck I want to play. If I know I'm playing in a 5-player game, I know I can play more of a lazy, laid-back type of deck where I can take my time ramping into something versus if I'm playing in a 3-player pod, I try to play my more aggro decks like my Boros deck because I'm either going to die right away or I'm going to somehow pull out the victory.
So let's expand on that then a little bit. So the difference in the deck, you intentionally would make a different choice in the deck you have based on the pod size.
Yes.
How about you, Chris?
Oh, yeah. I have a specific deck in mind for every time I play into a big pod, too.
So which one do you got? Is Mogus in the
Yep.
big pod? Because you're just throwing so much damage out there to everybody?
Yep. And then at the end of the day, even if I lose, at the end of the day, it's just like, well, I did 100 damage.
Well, sure.
So who cares?
That's a good point. It feels good because you're spreading so much of it around.
Yep.
Achievement unlocked.
I think I always think what Max you just said. You're right. Aggro decks are way better in a 3-player pod.
Yep.
In a 4-player pod, it's much trickier. A 3-player pod, you can go all out and maybe not get hit as hard. The only thing I have seen that is worth remembering is sometimes you get the situation where if there's 2 players that jump off to a good start, they just beat each other up in a way that in a 4-player game doesn't quite happen because there's 2 people that are doing things. In a 3-player game, it's really easy for those 2 players to just lock in one another and play 1v1 as you just sit back and
let them waste resources.
Let them do it. I won. This was years ago, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, but I actually won a game once in a 3-player pod where I did nothing. I had like I kept a terrible hand. I don't think I played a single spell the entire game. I like missed a land drop. I shouldn't have kept the hand. And the 2 other players got off to fast starts and were hammering one another. And somehow they ended the game by dealing lethal damage simultaneously. I won a 3-player pod casting 0 spells. And that would never happen in a 4-player game.
Must be nice.
And I doubt that happens very frequently.
I have seen it happen in competitive play.
Sure, where you take consideration. Yeah, I believe
And
that.
literally, you have to go to a game 4 if you're on game 3.
Is that what it does?
Because there has to be a solved solution or it has to be a draw.
Okay.
So if there's still time on the clock, you have to go to game 4.
On a 3-player game, I just got the win. All right. The other thing that jumps out at me, and this is something that I think there's 2 reasons games take longer in a 5-player pod. Number 1, there's that many more turns. Number 2, there's so many more answers. It seems like I've had those 5-player games where you feel like there's board wipes everywhere because there's that one extra person makes a huge difference. Have you seen that?
I've seen it, but I think it's not just that. I think it's more of in a 5-player pod, people want to show off. So they want to blow their board wipes after someone just did one 2 turns ago. So it's like, cool, your deck just did this cool splashy thing. Well, I'm going to one-up you. And you get these people going at it in that way, meaning like, you did something cool, well, I'm going to try to top it. Whether it's use a board wipe when it probably isn't the best time to do it because it's really only hurting 2 of the 5 players. Or you see a counter Magic War get started, which is terrible in a 5-player game.
Terrible for those players.
Right? You just sit there like, I can now cast this, and I can cast this, and I can cast this. But yeah, I think you're right. There are more answers. I mean, you're now adding another 99 cards to the game.
Right.
But it also means people need to build their decks appropriately. And I'm not saying build your deck because you know you're playing a 5-player pod, but you should build your deck to be able to play in any size pod.
Well, we've talked before about overextending. Now that's a thing that's really easy to do in a 4-player game. In a 5-player game, you're even that much more likely to get burned if you overextend. Number 1, there's just more chance for people to draw that answer. And number 2, someone's more likely to pull the trigger when they see that you're pulling ahead.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's also more people are going to notice you're pulling ahead.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to talk 4 other people into turning on you versus 3 other people. Because in a 4-player pod, you could be like, well, no, what he's doing is actually helping me because you don't know what's in my hand. But in a 5-player game, people are not paying attention, so they just see that you dumped 7 things on the board state. Yep, let's kill him and get him out of the game.
Well, there's having that extra set of eyes there makes it, there's been those games, we've all done it before, where we're playing and you look around and you're like, none of these 3 people understand what I'm about to do. They don't realize the advantage I have. My board state looks fine, but I've just been drawing a bunch of cards. I did this and that. No one knows my position. When you throw that extra person in there, that's one more person that can spot that and point that out. And I've had that happen before where I'm like in a 4-player game, like this would have slid. And in a 5-player game, that 5th person catches it. Mm-hmm. Or they catch that, or they can interfere in a way that you can't. Like, okay, I'm going to alpha strike these 2 dudes out. That's one more person who has a fog in hand. Or one more person that has a Maze of Ith out that can save somebody. There's just that many more monkey wrenches that can get tossed into the works.
Yeah, I mean, that's your percentage chance, but I honestly think in a smaller game, 3-player, you see more of the removal and it keeps the board state more clean because they're actually paying attention. And they have to, because they're like, okay, I'm only playing against 2 other people, so I have to take out these 2, so I have to take out their stuff to make sure that I can get through and do what I need to do.
Well, when Max drops a doubling season, and I'm playing with just you guys. Okay, well, I have this removal spell in hand. You're the only other person that's going to play a threat, and it's much easier for you to just be like, I'm not doing anything until Dana deals with that doubling season.
Yep.
Versus in a 5-player game, okay, Max drops a doubling season, instead of passing to you, who might just sandbag and let me deal with it, there's 2 other people that are like, oh, doubling season's out, cool. I'm dropping Mari's Wake because he's gonna hit the doubling season first. And the next person's like, I'm playing Parallel Lives. He's not hitting. That's perfectly safe as long as doubling season's out. And then like that happens too. Yep. The threats just come down because there's no longer that math where you're like, it's only one other person in the equation. That changes
then I play
everything.
Your command and blow them all out of the water.
Right. Because there's that many more board wipes too. That does make a difference.
And I wonder if that's why we started playing more of those types of board wipes. Because we used to play in bigger pods.
Yeah.
So mass wipes that could hit multiple like enchantments or artifacts or something like that because there were more people on the table.
It increases the math on that where you're like, oh, okay, in this particular situation, I want to do small creatures and enchantments or something like. Well, that's true. Just in general, whether it's board wipes or whatever, modular cards probably get better in a 5-player pod because there's so many more variables being able to tweak those around it.
Cryptic Command just gets so much better. Tap all your opponent's creatures.
Yeah, well, that's. I'll jump to that a little bit later on, but there are cards that specifically get better or worse in 3- and 5-player pods. But we'll come to that a little bit later on. The next one I want to touch on is creature combat in particular. How does that change from 3 to 5-player? Do you think? Particularly like the combat damage.
People's memory is much shorter
in a 3-player game.
No, in a bigger game.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes, in a bigger game for sure.
Now, if you're only in a 3-player pod, they remember you smacking them.
Absolutely,
now, if you're
do.
in like a 5- or 6-player game...
It's just a big mess.
Yeah, you smack them for 10 and they're like, whatever, this guy's more scary than you are, I really don't care. And
Right. I think in a 3-player game, you are more cautious about when you start swinging away. Chris isn't, but a player might be. Let's put it like that. Where in a 5-player game, I'm actually more advantageous. Be like, okay, cool, I'm just going to swing this 1/1 at someone because... there's, like Chris said, they're going to forget in 10 seconds.
You always send the 1/1 because people are more likely to take 1 damage and not really care about it compared to taking like
5,
6 or something. Yeah.
Well, there's also the thing that I've noticed a little bit in 5-player pods too, where you're much more vulnerable to the crackback in a 5-player pod than in a 3.
Yes.
In a 5-player pod, if you swing out at somebody, you're like, that's 4 different people that can swing back at you. And a 3-player pod is just 2. Like that's...
Yep.
You're half as likely in a 3-player pod to get hit if you leave yourself open than you are in a 5-player game.
That's why you split your attacks.
Yeah, well, but it's much tougher to do in a 5-player game, ignoring the fact that you're going to get yelled at for saying split your attacks. So that's definitely one I think I've seen. Any other ones that jump out at you guys? The other one that I've thought of is if you get flooded, the worst thing to get a bad hand or keep a bad hand or 5-player games where you have bad luck, and you're like, man, I have to wait 8 minutes between turns and this game's going to go 90 minutes. That's one thing I would say is if you have bad luck, that 5-player pod is miserable to play in. Or if you have a bad hand or keep a bad hand. In a 3-player pod, you might have the factor where they ignore you, number 1. And number 2, it's probably going to be over, worst case, in like 40 minutes. That 5-player game might go on for days.
I do got to say, for a 5-player game, though, I do enjoy when people have infinite combos built into their decks. Not like that's their original win con, but it's a way to end the game, but take everyone out at once.
Well, it becomes a much more reliable way to win the more players are in the game when you're killing people simultaneously than it is just trying to like chip people away.
Yep. And I don't feel quite as annoyed by them when I'm in a huge game because like, cool, let's start another one then.
Sure.
Right.
Whereas if you're in a small game, it's like, okay, we should be playing more, interactive Magic instead of you sitting here and gold fishing.
I think chip damage, talking about swinging with that 1/1, is a bigger deal in a 3-player. It's a much bigger deal in a 3-player game.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like plunking somebody with that turn 2 Llanowar Elves that you played last turn, and in a 3-player game, it almost then feels like you're playing 1v1 to a degree where every bit of damage you can get on somebody is going to make a difference. Versus a 5-player game, it feels meaningless.
Yeah. Well, also in a 5-player game, we'll take Llanowar Elves for instance, as you were saying. You want to use it more for mana because you want to try to build.
At that point, right.
It's almost like a Minecraft race. Like you're in a building race. Whereas in a 3-player game, you're more in a standstill with each player.
So how about cards that are better in 3 versus 5? Or even mechanics or anything that jump to mind for you guys?
Extra combat steps in a smaller pod are more advantageous because you have less opponents to kill.
Right, you can just win the game much easier with that extra combat set than you can in a multiplayer.
Helm of the Host in Aurelia. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Or Atraxa, or...
Well, that's a good one. As a mechanic in general, extra combat steps are much better
In smaller games.
in a 3-player pod.
I guess we could go some mechanics like that. The infect mechanic, as Max was saying about attract.
Same thing with combat. You only got to kill a couple people versus the whole table. I think some card, like specifically like Exotic Orchard kind of cards, where you're getting mana based on the lands your opponents have. That's twice in a 5-player pod. That's twice as many people you have that are making
You're
the
almost
color that you
guaranteed
need.
to have
Right.
all 5 colors.
Carpet of Flowers, that kind of card, where like if your opponents have islands, you get X amount of mana or whatever it is. Or I always forget the name of this card, Max, the black one that used to draw you cards that you used to run into Mocha. Mulch?
Compost.
No, Compost, there we go. In a 5-player pod, someone's going to be casting black spells. Multiple people might be casting black spells. I have twice as many people to choose from that have islands out. That guy has 5 versus that guy has 4 versus in a 3-player pod, you're much more likely to be like, no one's playing blue. 5-player pod, someone's playing blue.
No, on the backhand of that, I think Urborg's worse in a 5 in a
You're
big
helping
game.
that many more people with Urborg.
Oh, for sure.
Same with Bajukabog, because you can only target one person.
Right.
Whereas-
So it's an ETB land that's only hitting one graveyard.
And it's only working once.
Right. It's hitting one of the 2 graveyards you're worried about versus one of the 4 graveyards you're worried about. That's a good point.
Unless someone's strictly playing Reanimator, then you just blow their graveyard out.
I think those are the Reanimator right there. That's a great strategy for a larger pod because you have more graveyards to get stuff out of.
Sure, if you're taking other people's stuff. Yeah, Rise of the Dark Realms.
Insurrection.
Or Insurrection are so much better in a 5-player pod.
Expropriate.
Right. yeah. I mean, yeah. Which is like now a $50 card or something.
Why?
It got bought out this week.
Some mythic from a set that's not printed anymore.
It'll probably get reprinted, though, because it's not on the
Eventually.
reserve list. So
But the mechanic makes it kind of tough, but I could see it in a
It could be
master
like
set.
a
Yeah.
masterpiece. That's what they need to start doing. Masterpiece conspiracy cards.
We're talking about mechanics, Extort.
Oh,
Yes.
The more players in the game, Extort gets that much better. Or things like Grey Merchant.
Yep. That's why when I built Mogus, I built it as strictly, this is when I was big into World of Warcraft, as AoE damage.
Sure.
You know, area of effect damage, where you're hitting everything at once with X amount of damage.
And particularly when you're gaining life off that, it's just that much better. Whereas the Myriad mechanic, which was the one in, is it C15 or C16?
15, I believe.
Where when your creature attacks, it makes a copy of itself or does something based on the number of opponents you swing at. I think a Blade of Selves being the main one. When your creature attacks with Blade of Selves, it makes a token copy attacking each other opponent. In a 3-player pod, you're only ever getting 1 token. In a 5-player pod, you're getting 4. And if you're using a commander, I run Blade of Selves in my Jeru deck just to make a copy of Jeru to get a Planeswalker. I see it in Gonti plenty. That's the difference between getting 1 extra proc of that Gonti or 1 extra Planeswalker and getting 4 Planeswalker, or 3 Planeswalkers, I guess, or 3 Gonti triggers.
Right.
So stop me if I'm going too far into what you're about to say, but theme of a deck, such as commander damage, I think is worse.
Commander damage is way harder to do in a 5-player game than it is a 3-player game.
Well, we'll take like when I played Ural or your Sigarda.
Right.
It's harder because you choose someone, take him out. That leaves you wide open for the rest of the table. Go, oh, he can one-shot people. We have to take him out immediately.
You take somebody out with Ural, there's just one other person who's like, oh, wait, what? and if that person doesn't have an answer, they die next turn.
Yep.
Versus 3 other people that may have an answer, and you're still only killing one of them, which means the other 2 then have a turn, and you're only killing one of them. Like, you're adding an extra 3 turns of people trying to find answers.
Ural has red. Why aren't you running extra combat?
I guess.
That's true. I mean, I have had it where I swung and I hit someone with Ural and I was up of over 100 life. And literally by the time it came back to my turn, I was down to 5 life going, what just happened?
Yeah. Whereas in a 3-player pod, that wouldn't have been the situation. Smothering Tithe, which you mentioned before. Smothering Tithe, when you put the token in play based on cards your opponents draw, there's just that many more draws on the table before it comes back to you, or that many chances for someone to cast a Brainstorm and you to get 3 tokens. Consecrated Sphinx, how many more draws are you getting off Consecrated Sphinx?
Now, cards like Thoughtseize or Inquisition or any of the hand disruption would be much better in a smaller pod.
3-player pod, you're taking out one player's hand versus not touching any of the other people.
Yep.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of hand disruption. That's a good one as well.
Any of the creatures that say when someone casts a spell, you want as many players in those games as you can get.
Atali. Atali's getting you 5 cards versus getting you 4 cards versus getting you 2.
It gets you 5. It gets your own.
Your own. That's right. You get your own. So 5 versus 3. Or Jaleva's getting you, 2 additional is it 4 cards the first time, whatever it is.
It's whatever CMC is, yeah.
So it's giving you that many more chances to cast those cards off people when you swing with Jueva.
See, that's why they should just unban Leovold and let me play that again. And because then in big pods, I can just be like, ha, no cards for any of you. I get all the cards.
The one card I've also noticed really swings, it's a tricky card in the best of circumstances in a 4-player pod. Council's Judgment.
I love that card in multiple
Great card.
players.
But in a 5-player pod, when you cast Council's Judgment, you're like, let's see what happens because it could be anything. You have no idea what's going to happen. Whereas in a 3-player pod, you're pretty sure you know exactly what's going down, particularly if you're not in the lead. You're like, that one spell's definitely going away. 5-player pod, it could be anything.
We all know if Max is in the pod, he's going to
Max
screw
will
up
goof
the
it up
vote.
regardless, right?
And I'm the one who casted it half the
He'll
time.
pick his own commander somehow.
I like that card in 3-player pods because it's way less.
It is.
It's so much easier.
So much easier in a 3-player pod. It really can't get screwed up there at all. But I think any vote card that kind of applies to.
Right.
And if we're talking about conspiracy mechanics, things like the Monarch, where
That gets very annoying in a big game because it's constantly shifting back and forth
Right.
between everybody.
I've had mixed things with the Monarch in big pods. You have the pods like you just described where people are battling for it.
and it's bouncing all over the place.
Or you have it the opposite. They forgot you're the Monarch and they don't care.
I don't know how you could because honestly, if I had a free way of getting cards like that, I will fight for it.
Oh, no. Logically, yes, you should be fighting for that.
But you're also if you're making the swing for the Monarch, you're also then painting a target on yourself for that many more people to swing back at you, and you're leaving yourself open for those crackbacks. Versus in a 3-player pod, that's only 2 people that are doing that. Although I'm a big fan of the Monarch.
I love it.
I love it, yeah. I just want Palace Jailer to not be so expensive in foil.
How much is it in foil now? $50?
50 plus, yeah, because it's played in
Oh, that's
Legacy.
not
Legacy.
bad. Man, you had me worried because I needed one foil for my Alessia deck, and I was going to pick one up here coming soon, and I was like, oh no.
Let's look. We'll go to Card Kingdom right now.
Because I know the other recruiter that I got rid of that was foil, that's probably pushing 100 still.
Oof.
But I got my Imperial in foil, so I'm happy with
Oh,
that.
$40.
That's not terrible.
I'll order one for everybody.
You heard it. That was on
Ken,
air.
you can edit that.
So talking about chaotic things, chaos decks and group hugs decks.
Dana's
just-
favorite.
Yeah, I don't like them, but like everything gets that much crazier, or even just like chaotic cards get that much crazier in a 5-player game versus a 3-player
Possibility
game.
Storm or whatever
God.
it is.
Or even what's the
Omen Machine.
Perplexing Chimera out of Theros,
I
just
love that card.
bouncing around the table, wreaking havoc.
The reason I don't like, I agree, those type of cards or decks are worse in bigger pods, but specifically Perplexing Chimera, what's terrible is the fact that in a small pod, people still hem and haw over like, wait, I want to think about this before that
Right.
spell resolves. Well, now if there's 5 or 6 people, you're waiting like, I want to get like a chess timer, be like you have 30 seconds, make your decision, go.
Yeah.
See, no, I'm perfectly fine with group hug decks in a huge pod. Especially the group hug decks that are playing like Howling Mine and all that
They
stuff.
make the game go faster.
They're making the game go
Sure,
faster.
I guess that's true. It's a tends to speed things up, and if it speeds up the combo player getting his combo or what have you, then maybe that's fine. You're just trying to get out of the pod at that point. No, that kind of makes sense. I'd see that.
But usually they're always the last player left,
Right.
who is the group hug player. And then you can never kill them and you're just like, sure, whatever.
Well, I think that part of that is because the politics changes between 3 and 5. Is there anything you guys have really seen that makes a difference there, politically speaking, and deals people make?
People don't listen to me in 3-player games. But in 5-player games, I can usually sway someone.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Well, in a 3-player pod, they probably look at you much more like you're the enemy because there's only 2 other people versus a 5-player pod. You're much more likely to have an alliance or at least assume someone isn't your enemy, at least for the moment.
Yeah, I mean, in a 5+ player pod, you can easily be like, hey, that person's playing Kalia. They're just going to be dropping big fatties that fly.
right.
Get
So
rid
just,
of them.
Just let her resolve and let them swing.
Yep. Or let's all take that player out quick and move on.
I think it's probably also easier to make deals with, like, say, that Kalia player. If you have a counter spell in hand, it's much easier to be like, I could counter your Kalia, but
Don't swing at me.
don't swing at me. And in a 3-player pod, the person might be like, ugh, yeah, but it's only one other person to swing at, At some point, I need to swing at you. Versus a 5-player pod, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, I got to kill these other 3 dudes anyway. I might as well, sure, I'll make that deal. So I think you
Right.
can maybe get more of that kind of thing going on.
Yep.
Frickin' Kalia.
So how do you guys physically play your decks differently from 3 to 5?
Well, I draw a card with my left hand and put it.
In a 3-player game, you put your library on the left side of the table versus the right side in a 5-player pod.
That is another thing, though, that I've noticed. I didn't mean to
Don't get me started on that.
sidetrack, but when you're in a bigger pod, it is kind of annoying trying to figure out where to actually place your deck.
Sure, yeah, for sure.
So you can actually see everything and you have enough space. And
You almost need like a blackjack shoe to put your card in and then just draw like that. Specifically for me though, like I have a problem with overextending in any size pod, to be quite honest. But in the 5-player pods, I really just lay back and be like, you know what? I could be at 4 lands next turn in Jamoka because I have all these ramp spells, but you know what? No, we're just going to play land and pass and take it slow. Let's not become the threat.
It's way easier to sandbag in a 5-player game than it is in a 3-player game, and I'd probably do more of it in a 5-player game.
Well, a good theory to put into that is if you have, we'll take your Jamoka deck, for instance.
Okay.
5/7 flyer.
Yep.
Right? Not 4/7, 5/7.
Nope, 5/7.
Flying lifelink, whatever.
Can't cast spells on my turn.
Yep. Remember that
Fun
game.
part.
Yes, right.
No.
Okay, so with Jamoka, like that type of deck, if you have Jamoka out, you have no reason in a huge game to put anything else onto the field.
No.
Right, yeah.
Force them to deal with that first. If you're playing like a big beater deck, do that too. But now if you're playing like elves or something, you kind of have to overextend no matter what kind of pod you're playing in.
Well,
because
right.
it's a quantity thing over quality.
Right. I would agree with that.
At that point, though, I think it comes into kind of what I said at the beginning of the show is if you know you're playing in a 5+ player pod game, maybe don't play elves. Because after a couple board wipes,
yes, you're just done.
You might be done if you can't recover, if you don't have like a Praetor's. What's the.
Praetor's Council?
Praetor's Council.
Yeah, Praetor's. If you don't have Praetor's Council or any type of graveyard to library regrowth in your deck, playing a low to the ground aggro deck in a big pod means you're either going to kill someone and then die, or just die because you're going to overextend. Someone's going to cast Wrath of God, and then you're stuck with one card in hand for the rest of the game.
So you just play all the mana darks, and then you play Whirlwind and kill everybody.
Simultaneously, including yourself.
No, one of his lives gained him a land. One of his lands gained him a life. There we go.
That's true. So that's enough. That's enough. But yeah,
just one.
How about you, Chris? What do you do differently in the pods in terms of playstyle?
Not too much different. I try not to overextend, but I try to put something into the board to try to advance board state. There are times, like when I'm playing Alesha, if I have Eldrazi Monument in my hand, I'm like, you know what? We're just going to go for it. Either you guys can deal with this or you can't, and the game's going to be over.
You can be much more reckless, I think, in the 3-player pod than you can in the 5 with how you play. That's definitely true. You can be more aggro, I think, for sure, and not get punished for it. So I think that's part of that. You can be more reckless. You can do those kind of things without worrying about it. Maybe let your life total go a little bit lower because you're less likely to have to hit, although that's not usually something I hold back on too much.
Pot calling kettle boiling.
Well, that's also, I mean, you could do that in a 5-player pod because a lot of people start forgetting things.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
Like, say I started out at 40 life. After like turn 10, I'm down to like 10. And people are like, oh, well, you don't really have a board state or anything. I forgot that you were so low where I could have just like chipped you off to get you out of the game to focus then on someone else. No, they just turn and focus on someone else.
Well, I think definitely that difference, and this has been a thought thing I've had before, in a 5-player game, and you see that person who hasn't done much and they've been taking incidental damage and they're like, oh, I can kill him right now. Well, in a 3-player game, though, having that one extra person there who's really weak probably isn't going to soak up many other attacks from the one other opponent you have to worry about. In a 5-player game, that's not true. Someone else might go for that juicy target if you leave that person alive. Just I think because people are much more aware of the board set in that 3-player game. So I think that one is definitely something I do differently in a game, as I'm less likely to go for the kill in a 5-player game than I am in a 3-player game. But one thing I've actively considered before in a 5-player game, when I've had the bead on somebody, like I can kill that person safely right now, and I'm fine for the crackback. I've got a sudden spoiling in hand and a Swords of Plowshare, so I can probably deal with big threats. I've still thought about, but if I kill that person, then I'm the person who killed somebody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even if I'm not the threat, everyone's being like, yeah, but he took somebody out. Maybe that makes him the dangerous person. So I've had that adjust whether I take somebody out or not because I
That's
don't
just a
want to be.
millennial attitude. That's what that is.
Wow.
All our young YouTube subscribers are now hitting the unsubscribe button because of you, Chris.
Y'all can hate me. I don't care. No, I'm just being honest, though. That's the attitude of the newer generation is more of a feeling for other people.
More empathy.
Yeah, empathy. That's what I was looking for.
So you don't mean that in a bad
Feeling
way.
other people
So you're saying
and
that,
empathy are two different
in a positive way is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Because they feel bad because now that person is actually out of the game, so they can't play.
Well, that's the other thing. In a 3-player pod, too, maybe, like in a 5-player pod, particularly if you're the only ones there that are playing, in a 5-player pod, you bump somebody out. They're just sitting there waiting for what's now a 4-player
Yes.
game to wrap up, which still might go a while. In the 3-player pod, you bump somebody out. Well, now it's 1v1, and it's probably going to wrap up pretty quickly.
Yep.
Oh, for sure.
So no, I didn't. That's actually a good point. I hadn't really thought of that. Yeah, that would definitely make a difference too. Like I do not feel remotely bad knocking somebody out if they're in a weakened position in a 3-player pod because you're just going to wrap things up.
If I'm ever in a 5-player pod with anyone who listens to us and we're at our local game shop, you can kill me right away. I don't care. I'll just walk around and chit-chat with everybody and anybody.
You'll
So
take a
up
nap.
working.
You take a nap on your cot and back or something. So what specific decks then, Max? I'll start with you. You mentioned maybe Dramoka, but like, so which ones do you look at to put in which pod? Chris already said Mogus in the 5-player. Of your decks, which ones go where?
I think Dramoka and Regna and Krav go in the 4+ player pods.
Okay.
They consistently do well. I can slow them down to where I don't need to be hyper aggressive. Where in a 3-player pod, I can still be hyper aggressive with both of those decks. Where Tajik and Brago like the 3 to 4 player pods, especially Brago because I do run a lot of control magic, like counter magic in that deck, and I only run like 6 counter spells in that deck and 6 counter spells in a 5+ player pod game.
Much.
I have to be really, really careful about when I use them.
Whereas in a 3-player pod, that's much more powerful.
Right, but at the same time, Brago does combo off easier in the bigger pods because people forget about it. So all of a sudden it's, oh, here's a Stronic Resonator and a Sun Titan and a Strip Mine. All your lands are gone.
Well, that was my
you did
thought.
that to me once.
That was my thought going in was of Max's decks, the ones in a 3-player pod that would worry me the most would be Tajik and Brago.
Yes.
Chris, how about you? You said Mogus in the 5 is one you want to run. So is Celestia your preferred 3-player deck?
Preferred, because I actually have it built for smaller pods.
It's pretty aggro too.
I detuned it quite a bit. But if I were to go back into back into bigger pods, I would probably tune it harder.
Sure.
Because it needs more of the removal. It needs more of a little bit bigger beaters and stuff like that for it.
Are those the only 2 decks you have together aside from your
Ramos that I
Ramos or your
finally sucked it up and bought that card for?
Nice.
Speaking of, I need to borrow Mogus to put a list up online. We had a listener ask for it. I'll do it. You just got to give me the deck.
Give him the deck, he'll take care of it.
I'll do it all.
Oh, I gotta go pull it out now. Brush the dust off of it.
Chris I think you just have a dusty house, I think is what you're telling us.
No, not with Cindy in the house.
No, my house is actually really clean. It's very surprising.
So, Dano, I'm guessing Asperia is maybe your 5-player pod deck.
I can definitely afford to sandbag in that deck and take my time and then take control of the game later on.
People don't realize that. See, that's the big thing with like a 5-player pod. People don't pay attention to what the general is.
Exactly.
And that deck is a really good deck where people want to slack off anyway because they're like, oh, it's just a Sphinx. I'm not gonna, like, it's easy to go under the radar with that deck unless you've played it a bunch of times. And in a 5-player pod, it's that much easier to do it with.
True. Now, like, we'll take one I used to play Slivers, which is hiding, so no one will ever see that deck again.
Yay.
As soon as someone sees that you're playing Slivers, no matter what size pod it is, you're immediately the target.
Sure, you're getting swung at.
So that's the type of deck you'd rather play in a 3-player pod. We could take
Rafik.
Rafik or Riku, both in a smaller pod. You're less likely to be targeted.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think my Glissa deck probably fares better in a 3-player pod.
Yeah, because you don't have a win condition in it anymore now that you took everything out.
And you only play like 7 creatures and 4 basic lands.
I have upped the basic land count. I'm up to
6.
Up to 12 basic lands. I actually...
Back to Basics is now readily available.
It is. I'm up to 12. Let's baby step here. And I'm thinking about putting Mindslaver back in. Jason Alt kind of talked me into it a little bit.
I think you should. It's a win con, and you shouldn't feel bad about doing it if you know you're going to win the game.
And it doesn't kill everybody. It kills one person for the most part. Everyone else has a chance to respond or not respond because you're taking out one person. So he's kind of convinced me that it was a good 75% card, so I may be going back to that. We'll see.
Last time I played it, I really was curious, how am I going to win this game?
Yeah,
And I actually tutored, and I'm like, is Torment still in here? I'm like, I don't see it. I don't think I'm winning.
You're like, I'm going to not lose for a long time. That's what that deck plays like. I'm going to not lose anytime in the near future, but I'm going to struggle to win.
I'm going to be the last person killed in this game.
Right. Yeah.
I love second.
So maybe that's why I need to put Mindslaver back in. I think I'm leaning towards doing that. I will probably decide before we play again. Well, tomorrow night I'm actually going to go play at the shop.
I was going to say, you have like 24 hours.
Yep. Any other thoughts before we wrap this up on the size of the pods from you guys?
I honestly think it is more fun to play in a bigger pod. There's more camaraderie with people. It's not so cutthroatish usually.
That's definitely true. It feels more casual.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it depends on the time of the night. I'd rather, if I want to play in a bigger pod, I want to do it first.
Sure. I would agree with that.
Because I have the attention span to pay attention to a large game versus 10 o'clock at night. Oh, we're the last 5 or 6 people in the shop. Let's just play a big pod. Well, then you're there for 3 hours and you're already tired. And it's like, oh, okay. What did I miss? Oh, I forgot to play a land 3 turns in a row, whatever.
And honestly, for a big pod, I would suggest to everybody, do it on a day when you have like 3 or 4 hours and play Plane Chase.
Yeah.
The Plane Chase EDH multiplayer is a lot of fun on a big pod.
And just take it casual. Don't be so cutthroatish with it. Don't pull out a deck that's like super tuned, tweaked. Play something that's just going to be like, cool, you know what? If we get on my plane, you guys are not going to like it. But if we don't, then just see what happens.
I'm playing Boros, and I want the plane with all the double strikes.
Well, and I think we will do a show that's been suggested to us by some people in our Slack, and I think we'll do a show down the road on different commander variants. So not just pod size, but like we'll talk about Plane Chase, we'll talk about Sheriff and those kind of different games that we've played or people can play in Commander.
I haven't played any of those in quite a while.
I was going to say, I have to learn how to play those now.
I haven't played Sheriff in a long time, but I did just play Two-Headed Giant Commander the other night at the shop with a new player. That was one of the things we did was play a Two-Headed Giant.
Two-Headed Giant's so much fun.
And I opened with, I was playing my new Teysa deck, which I have a Mana Crypt in just because she's
14 mana.
14 mana to cast. So I have a Mana Crypt in there, and I opened with Mana Crypt on turn 1, and we proceeded to lose 7 consecutive coin flips. Mana Crypt. In Two-Headed Giant, we actually went with a 30 life total. So we lost 21 life.
You took commander damage from Mana Crypt.
We took commander damage from Mana Crypt, absolutely. So yeah, when you say the Mana Crypt damage doesn't matter.
It does.
It absolutely does when you lose every single coin flip.
Did you double check that coin and make sure it wasn't like...
It was, we were rolling dice for doing odds and evens. And like odds take damage is what you always say, like odds are bad. So I rolled 7 consecutive odd numbers.
Speaking of rolling dice, on Monday, we rolled when I was playing Modern for who goes first. And I have these really nice weighted metal dice.
Yep.
We gave them away a couple months ago on Patreon.
We did.
I rolled mine, and one of my dice stopped right on the corner and just sat there. And I looked at it. One of the guys took a picture of it with his phone. I'm like, what do we call that? He's like, cock dice, just re-roll it. I'm like, what is going on here? And I've never seen that in my life.
You go, I won the match.
Right, yeah, right.
I won the match. That's how it ends.
If your dice lands on the side like that, perfectly balanced, you win. I agree with that.
It's like when you flip the coin and it lands straight up and down.
Well, I think we will be back. We got a couple more deck tech shows we will release on Thursday. Probably the next 2 months, we'll do a few each month.
Quite a few, yep.
And we'll be back next week with our usual show on Monday morning. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Boom.